What up, Wizards? It's Dev from The Place, and it's my birthday this week. That means I get to talk about whatever I want here on my own channel, so long as it's Magic related. Otherwise, I would have done a video tier listing all the Jokers in Bellatra, maybe one of these days. I guess if we gotta talk about Magic, then what I want to talk about most, maybe surprisingly, is Commander. Been going bananas in the format lately with one of my favorite little dudes from Final Fantasy. It's not Sephiroth, although I do love him. It's not Hope S time, although I do love him, and I know a lot of you absolutely despise the little guy. Instead, I've been putting on my dancing shoes and hitting the floor with Black Waltz number 3. It's like a gutter snipe in your command zone, cutting a rug and cutting everything else around it at the same time. You know, Rakdos Spellslinger is an awesome concept, and we don't get enough. I've seen Izzet sling enough spells for a lifetime, but Rakdos is a cool color combination for something like this, and we almost never get to see it. Plus, this guy's like 35 cents, so whether your budget is $50 or $5,000, he's going to fit into it, which is actually what I want to address today. I could just bring you a deck tech, and I am going to give you a deck list down there in the description for the Black Waltz number 3 deck that I've ended up on, but I've been brewing this guy for close to 3 months now, and I have seen hundreds of cards that I think work really well in just about any of these builds. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to talk about 100 cards that you could use in Black Waltz number 3.
And I'm your favorite Magic Channel's favorite Magic Channel. Best believe that the professor go bananas for my deck tech.
Whoop whoop, new series alert. Let me know if you like this and I'll do more like them. But first, a quick ground rule. There's going to be certain kinds of cards I'm not going to bring up in this video. Like, it would be a waste of all of our time. Yours mostly if I told you to play mana rocks in your deck, you know to do that. Same thing with removal. Do you really want me to sit here on this couch and list all the playable Rakdos removal spells? Maybe we'll make a whole video out of that one day and it'll still be 6.5 hours long. So again, you know to play removal. I'm also not going to be telling you to play like dual lands in the deck. That's another way to waste slots on this list. But apart from that, I'm not going to be telling you to play Swiftfoot Boots or Lightning Greaves in here either, even though they are particularly important cards for this deck specifically. Those are other cards you probably just play in all of your Commander decks anyway. And that frees up a lot of slots on the list to talk about cards that actually synergize with the Commander, which again, I think is more worth all of our time. So let's go ahead and jump in. There's a lot to discuss today. And I think the most important thing to start with is probably stuff that's a little bit like BW3, right? Like things that trigger when you cast a non-creature, or at the very least, an instant or sorcery. I've already mentioned Gutter Snipe. You probably want to play that, although there is a bit of a difference between this and Black Waltz. Black Waltz will trigger off of non-creature spells, whereas Gutter Snipe only works with instants and sorceries. Still works perfectly fine in this deck, but I do mostly want to focus on dudes that trigger off of non-creature spells rather than just instants and sorceries. To that end, we've got stuff like Firebrand Archer in here, as well as Kessig Flame Breather, which are extremely similar cards, and yet one is 25 cents, the other one's $2.50. I don't want to try to wrap my brain around that. I'll just play both of them in the deck. They're great. But we've also got Coruscation Mage, which you can break the rules of Commander with by playing a couple of copies of, technically. You can offspring it, or you can even play Fire Spitter Whelp, which costs a little bit more mana, but also triggers off of non-creatures. But there is a distinct lack of dudes in Magic history that trigger off of non-creature spells. A lot of them are a little bit more specific and trigger off instants and sorceries, but still pretty good in this deck. We got stuff like Thermo Alchemist and Unruly Catapult to look at. Both of these will untap when you cast instants and sorceries. You can tap them for a damage, so that can lead to a lot of damage in a turn. But a really interesting creature along these same lines is Chandra Fire of Kaladesh, which will cost you a little bit extra compared to some of these other creatures, but if you can tap it down 3 times in a turn by casting like red spells, well, then suddenly you get a Planeswalker you can do some cool stuff with, and I like that mode. There's also stuff like Electrostatic Field that has a decent toughness, Erebor Flamesmith, which does not, but it's still pretty good, and then Fiery Inscription, which isn't even a creature. A little bit harder to take this thing out, and it'll trigger all your a non-creature spell was cast guys. I like that. There's also Rockslide Sorcerer if you're looking for kind of a weird guy like this. This triggers off of instant sorceries and wizards, which there are quite a lot of in the deck. A Rockslide Sorcerer might be a little bit on the expensive side mana-wise, but there are a number of like 4, 5, and even 6 mana things that I want to take a look at when building this deck that are really, really powerful. Even stuff like Caldera Pyramaw is pretty slick. It gets larger throughout the game, pings a bunch of stuff. Nice. Professor Onyx is a really fun card to play with that Magecraft ability especially. And speaking of Magecraft, Ashling Flame Dancer is just about a must-play in my opinion for this deck. Sometimes this rummages through cards, sometimes it makes a bunch of mana, which the deck always wants, and sometimes it casts Pyroclasm one-sided and hits the opponents in the face too, for that matter. Just a really awesome card here. At 5 mana, there's Torwaoki the Younger. This is a really, really cool card that might cost a lot of mana, but will actually end up doing a lot of damage. If you want to spend some money, there's Urabrask, just Urabras. This guy's like 13 bucks right now, but he makes mana when we cast spells, and he pings stuff when we cast spells. Really the best of both worlds, and when he flips over, he's got an ability on him at the end that can kind of help us win the game by giving all the stuff in our graveyard flashback. More on that later, but this is just one of the cards in the deck that could provide that mode for you. Now, a really weird inclusion that's along these lines that I nonetheless want to point out is Weaver of Lightning. Now, this can only hit creatures when you cast spells, but it hits creatures when you cast spells. Not a whole lot of our other dudes are capable of doing that. So if you're casting 3-4 spells in a turn, you can take out a lot of different stuff, or you can take out a bunch of little stuff. That's totally fine too. Just an interesting card that I don't see in too many of these lists. Now we do have a couple of more cards I want to look at that deal damage when we cast spells. Stuff like Aria of Flame and especially Sentinel Tower. These are really similar cards, and even though Sentinel Tower cost an extra mana over Aria, it doesn't make all your opponents gain 10 life, so it's probably the better card. What I think both these cards on screen mostly have going for them is that they're really cool. And this is a deck that gets to play a lot of really cool cards if it wants to. And to prove that point, we're going to look at some other stuff that triggers when you cast spells. And some stuff I think is kind of important. You know, we've got cards like Burning Prophet as well as Garland from the Final Fantasy set. You don't really have to worry about flipping over Garland too much or casting him from your graveyard, I guess. You're probably not going to be doing that unless you have nothing else to do with your mana, but cast a spell Scry is really, really good. The same thing is true on Burning Prophet. For only a couple of mana, both of these dudes will help you fix your draws, which is something that this deck really needs. Deck really wants to draw a lot of cards, that's for sure, but sometimes scrying is like drawing half of a card, and that's really important for a deck like this, to churn through and get to the good stuff. But my favorite dude like this is probably Fandaniel, even though he costs 2.5 times as much to cast as the other two creatures we've looked at. I still think this dude's awesome because he's got some real oomph in the bottom half of that text box, forcing some hard decisions on your opponent. But for just a second, let's get back to the stuff that deals damage when you cast spells. There's a lot of stuff like this in any potential Black Waltz number 3 deck that you're building, but some of the most powerful stuff is all the other things from Final Fantasy that make these little like 0-1 wizard guys. Like I said, not a whole lot of creatures that are extant in Magic currently care when you cast non-creature spells, and they'll convert it into damage for you. There's only a few of those guys, but these wizards from Final Fantasy will do it when you cast non-creature spells. So I kind of want to play as many of those as humanly possible, so long as they're actually good enough. And stuff like Black Mage's Rod and Cornered by Black Mages, these are both for sure good enough. These are decent cards. But that's not all. There's actually a bunch of these things that make the little wizard guides that I would consider playing in this deck. Stuff like Kuja, Genome Sorcerer, which is going to make multiple little wizard dudes for you, and it flips over pretty easily in this deck. We've already got a few wizards, right? And once it flips over, our guys do even more damage. Nice. But I would even consider playing Circle of Power and Transpose in this deck. Like I said earlier, we need card draw in this deck, and I've got a whole section of the video dedicated to card draw, but this is the section of the video dedicated to the little 0-1 wizards guys. And these guys do both. They draw cards and make the wizards, and that's actually sick. Plus, the lifelink on Circle of Power is sneakily extremely good in this deck. We'll talk more about lifelink later on in kind of a whole section I've dedicated to it, but just know that lifelink is great to have in this deck. I keep teasing other sections of the video, but we are not close to done with these things that trigger when you cast spells. You will consider Young Pyromancer, and you will play that in your deck. I think that of all of these, this is the one you play, but Sedgemoor Witch is probably the second in command when it comes to stuff that makes creatures when you cast spells, which is amazing, dude. But apart from that, you've got slightly more expensive mana-wise stuff to consider, like Judith Carnage Connoisseur, which made the cut in my deck. Rite of the Dragon Caller costs 6 mana, but does win you the game. Gisa the Hellraiser, you're committing a bunch of crimes, so why not make some 2/2s? And even Mana Form Hellkite is worth considering in the list. This might only make creatures for one turn, but it makes a whole bunch of them if you're playing right. There's even Storm Splitter, which also makes a bunch of creatures when you cast spells. It's a nice little card, but there's stuff like Stormkiln Artist in this deck, which we absolutely need. Again, kind of a must play in this thing. We absolutely want these treasure tokens, buddy. There's things like Artist Talent, which will churn us through cards, and eventually, once we get it all the way leveled up, deal a bunch more damage. Harnesser of Storms is a weird one, but like I've said a few times, we gotta churn 3 cards in this deck. And Harnesser of Storms is a 10-cent way of doing it, kind of drawing an extra card every turn. Nothing wrong with that, but if you want to spend some mana, well, that too. But if you want to spend some money, there's Primal Amulet in here. Costs you close to $8 right now, but it'll also make it where you can copy spells on the land half, and on the front half, it'll reduce the cost of your spells. These are all good things. Speaking of copying spells, there are a few things you could consider that do it. Things like Double Vision might cost a lot of mana for a pretty pretty skim text box, but it's a good text box at the same time. If you wanted to have a lot of random fun, you could play Arcane Bombardment. Turns out it works outside of Arena, too. Never seen anybody resolve this card in paper, but it'd be a lot of fun to try. Things like Chandra, Hope's Beacon also go pretty well in this deck. This is a sick Planeswalker that makes mana forest, gets us that carded selection that we need. I like that, but also copies spells. Yes, that's good. Aetherflux Reservoir could go in this deck. This also triggers when you play spells, and obviously it could end up doming someone for their entire life total, which I kind of like, but it also keeps our life total up, which we want. There's even stuff like Sunbird's Invocation, which might cost a ton of mana, but is absolutely worth it to just have on the table once it's there. If you're going to cast all these like 5 and 6 mana cards, I guess you want to play Burgi in the deck. That'll also keep your mana production up. There's stuff like Bothersome Quasit, which doesn't look super great at first glance, but you will be the archenemy a lot of the time once you start getting all your pingers out. People really hate getting pinged, it turns out, and they will come for you. So Bothersome Quasit makes it a lot harder for them to come for you by goading their creatures. Just when you cast spells, I think it's a pretty good trade-off. And then finally for this section, there's Veilstone Amulet. We are going to want to protect our dudes, and Veilstone Amulet actually makes it really, really easy to do that. Now, basically any instant in our hand is a protection spell, which is a cool ability to have too. Now, I may not be telling you to play removal or rocks or dual lands in the deck. I'm not wasting your time with that, but I am going to try and tell you what all tutors you can play in a deck like this, because a deck like this needs a ton of tutors. More on why when we get done with this section, but needless to say, there are a ton in black and even like one in red that you could play to your advantage. So with that in mind, you got your demonic tutors and your vampiric tutors if you got them laying around, or you got a printer where you have $50, I guess, if you want to do it that way, then play either one of these. These are two of the best tutors ever printed, if not the best tutors ever printed, so play them. But if you have $20 or $30 respectively, you could play Grim Tutor or Cruel Tutor. These are both acceptable. If you want to spend a little less money, there's stuff like Gamble at $10, just a single red mana, sure. Diabolic Intent, you'll have creatures to sacrifice, why not? That too is only $10. If you want to spend $1 million, I guess you could play Imperial Seal. I shouldn't even bring this one up. No one should be playing Imperial Seal unless they have a printer. But either way, there's really a lot of cheap ones too. You know, tutors take a bad rap for being really expensive, but there's a ton of affordable tutors that you could play if you felt like it, and you probably do. Stuff like Infernal Tutor is only 25 cents, and this deck goes Hellbent very easily. Profane Tutor's only about $3 right now. If you got a couple of turns to wait for your tutored card, I guess you can. There's stuff like Insatiable Avarice, which also puts the card on top like a Vampiric Tutor, only it costs like $2, which is a pretty good deal. Wishclaw Talisman is only $2.50 right now. If you want to do some shenanigans, I guess you could give that a shot. And then finally, there's even Diabolic Tutor, the OG, and one of my favorites, man. This thing is like $1, and there's an interesting mathematical equation going on. Apparently, when a card costs double what the original cost mana-wise, it costs 50 times less what the original does price-wise. That's a rate I can get behind. But what's more important than your tutors is the stuff that you're actually tutoring for. What are the really important win-on-the-spot cards in this deck? Well, there's a few different kind of categories to talk about when it comes to that, but one of my favorite tricks is trying to infect your opponents. And sure, it takes a lot to take everybody down from 40 life, but imagine if you just had to put 10 poison counters on everyone. That'd be easy enough with stuff like Phyresis or Glistening Oil. Either one of these will make it to where your Black Waltz or any number of your other creatures that just deal damage just straight to the face have infect, so that'll speed up the clock a lot for you. But there's a couple of other stuff like this, like Grafted Exoskeleton and even Tainted Strike, which might be like $1.75 right now. Heck, Exoskeleton's close to $5, but I actually think these are really good prices for cards that, again, could effectively just win you the game the turn that you get them on the table. Now, when it comes to Tainted Strike, you might only get the one turn to pull it off, but I think you can in that one turn if you have enough stuff. And it's pretty easy to get enough stuff in this deck if you have the cards that play things out of your graveyard. Stuff like Underworld Breach, which you might also tutor for in a lot of situations. Underworld Breach is a game changer, but it's only like $10 right now, so I think it's worth it to play one of the most powerful cards we could play to spend $10. But apart from that, there's stuff like Will of the Jeskai, which is $5.50 right now, a little bit cheaper, and it'll also allow you to play stuff out of your yard. Things like Past in Flames exist. This is only like $1.50 right now, and it's effectively the same thing, and you can flash it back on a later turn, and even Return the Past is a pretty decent card. This costs 6 mana for an enchantment, so it's a little bit hefty, but once it's on the table, it's on the table, and it works every single turn. You know, you want to pay $150 for a Yawgmoth's Will? I don't think you do. I'd rather pay 6 mana for Return the Past and suddenly just have Yawgmoth's Will every single turn. It's pretty good. But something else that you might tutor for is an effect that doubles or triples or whatever the damage that you're actually dealing with all your little dudes on the table. There's stuff like Torbrand Thane of Redfell for just $275 right now, and I say just $275 because a lot of the cards that do stuff like this are pretty freaking expensive. Your Furnace of Wrath effects, as it were. Even Furnace of Wrath is like $6 right now, and it's one of the worst kinds of this effect nowadays. You've got stuff like O'Hare Axonil, which is $10, but ends up really increasing your damage output, and even becoming, you know, a dug land later on. You've got Fiery Emancipation, which is $10 for some reason. Soulfem Mayhem Dominus, which is $16 right now. Just kind of gratuitous how much you're paying for these, so you might as well play Gratuitous Violence instead. This is just 75 cents right now, and even with the big red commitment, I think I'd rather play it than some of these other things and spend my money. If I did want to spend my money, though, I guess there's also Twin Flame Tyrant, which is like $20 right now, but is also a pretty slick little creature. There's also Mechanized Warfare, which will do extra damage when red sources do things, which is going to be most of the time, but is only like 3 mana and 50 cents, which I think is a really, really good deal. But another card that I put in this category, because I couldn't really figure out where else to park it in this video, is Chandra's Incinerator. This too costs a boatload of mana, but once it's out, you can take out a bunch of creatures, because you're going to be dealing damage to your opponent's domes pretty reliably, but you're not going to be removing their creatures that reliably unless, you know, you're playing actual black removal spells. You've got a lot of them, but again, you want me to go through all of them? But in any case, you're not going to be removing their creatures with your creature's abilities very often, but this makes it where you can do that, and I think it's kind of important sometimes. Speaking of cards that I really didn't know like where to put in this video, I guess we'll use this opportunity to talk about Harmonic Prodigy and Roaming Throne. Roaming Throne you're probably going to set to Wizard most of the time, right? But Harmonic Prodigy also has the ability to work with Shamans, which is cool because we got a couple of those in the deck as well. You definitely want one or both of these. If you can't afford the $30+ for a Roaming Throne, at least try to get your hands on a Prodigy. I think it's important. And to finish off this little section here, I guess another thing that you might tutor for from time to time is Lifelink, because again, Lifelink is so good in this deck. So with that in mind, you might go grab a Shadow Spear and equip it to more or less any of your guys. That's pretty good, but that too is like $35 like Roaming Throne, so we're kind of running up the register at this point. We can play Whip of Erebos in here. That's a little bit less expensive, but still $8. That said, if all your dudes have Lifelink, that's going to be good for you, I think. There's Vampiric Link if you want to basically play Spirit Link, but in the color combination you're on. I kind of like that. Just throw it on any of your dudes and you're gaining a bunch of life, and it's really cheap. And the same tip, you got stuff like Eternal Thirst in here, I guess. You know, it's like 20 cents right now to put, you know, Lifelink on one of your dudes, which is always good. And then even Basilisk Collar. I say even Basilisk Collar. It's probably the best thing that I've listed so far that gives your guys Lifelink, except for maybe Whip and Shadow Spear, but it's in a pretty elite class of cards in this deck, so I think it's worth playing for a pretty low cost here price-wise. Now that is a lot of important cards to consider playing that basically win you the game. Yes, even the Lifelink stuff, I'll stick by that. And you can't tutor into all of them, so you really need to draw cards in this deck. Worst thing that can happen to you in this pile is that you run out of cards, and it's actually pretty easy to do in red and black. It's not like you have islands in your deck. So we're going to play a bunch of card draw here that not only has the ability to keep our hand fresh and keep us churning through and playing spells and dealing damage and all that, but they're also, you know, all non-creature spells, so that should help too. First of all, there's the obvious stuff, things like Big Score and Unexpected Windfall, which are more or less identical Magic cards, things like Demand Answers and Thrill of Possibility, which are not identical, but they all stem from the Tormenting Voice family tree, so I'll just kind of put them in the same category. And then things like Rin's Resolve and Reckless Impulse, which are literally identical cards entirely, so you can play any or all of these as a matter of fact. Sometimes redundancy is good, especially when the cards themselves are this good to begin with. You got some good stuff in black too, by the way. I don't want to let red hog all the card draw here. There's stuff like Night's Whisper and Sign in Blood, both of which are just draw 2s for 2 mana. Do not notice, don't care about the life gain there. It doesn't matter. Faithless Looting, back to the red stuff, I guess, for now. This is just a single mana to draw a couple of cards, and you can even flash it back and get more triggers off of you cast an instant or sorcery, guys. Please play Faithless Looting in this deck. It's only an American quarter to get your hands on it. Jessica's Will costs, 100 times more than that, but still, this can get you a lot of mana all at one time, which is, again, the deck wants that. Or it can draw you a bunch of cards impulse draw you a bunch of cards, but still, you'll take it. Things like Bolus's Citadel also cost a pretty penny, but I think are more or less locks for this deck. I think that if you're going to play a single card draw effect in this pile, it should probably be Bolus's Citadel. It's that good. Apart from that, there's Virtue of Courage, a card that I don't see a whole lot of people playing in this deck. It baffles me because the one half of it triggers all of your you cast an instant or sorcery things, and it's a removal spell, and it can go face. Let's go. But if you cast the enchantment half of it, suddenly you're impulse drawing like every card in your deck every turn. Like you can churn through a lot of cards just by dealing damage with your dudes. So I think that you should basically lock in a Virtue of Courage in this deck almost no matter what the build is. I am that confident in it. But, you know, again, if you wanted to play cards people actually play in their commander decks, you could play Black Market Connections. That'll cost you like $17 right now, and so will the granddaddy of them all, Necropotence. This is just a really freaking good Magic card. So is Black Market Connections for what it's worth. Again, with the lifelink, especially once you get that set down in this deck, you can do stuff like Bolus's Citadel. You can do stuff like pick all the modes on Black Market Connections or whatever and not really care as much. But, you know, you start at 40, you can probably pick the modes on Black Market and not really care as much regardless. But either way, there's also stuff like Underworld Connections. If you want those kind of connections, those are only 50 cents, and I think that it's worth having those kind of connections. If you want a stronger card along those same lines, there's obviously Phyrexian Arena, but there's even Count on Luck, which will cost you a bunch of red mana, but once it's on the table, it's effectively the same as a Phyrexian Arena in a lot of ways. One of my favorite potential card draw pieces for this deck, though, is Valgavoth, Harrower of Souls. Now, I am a standard player, so I know more about the other Valgavoth, the 9 mana mono black one, so I didn't really know much about this Valgavoth before I started looking at cards for this deck a couple of months back. And let me just say, this dude's awesome. This dude's really, really good. Is a big threat in his own right. Helps like take over the table once he's out and gets you a lot of card advantage too before it's all said and done. So I'm not saying Valgavoth has to be in this deck. He is $15. If you're building on a budget, don't worry about it. But he is a great card. Now I said I wasn't going to show you all the dual lands for the deck, but there's at least 2 lands that I'm playing in this deck that I feel the need to point out. There's Witch's Clinic. Speaking of, again, lifelink. If you give your commander lifelink in this deck, you can probably gain a lot of life off of that. But there's also Lindblom Industrial Regency, which I could have brought up when I talked about all the cards that make the little 0/1 wizard guys, but I saved it for the land. So here we are. You play Lindblom. It's good. You definitely play this card. And we made it, everybody. 100 cards to consider for this deck. And that's not counting honorable mentions, stuff like Chaos Wand, which is a lot of fun and costs like 25 cents right now, so you can get this for a comically low amount of money, and it's great. Warlock class goes very well in this deck. If you don't have artist talent, or you don't want to spend $5 on an artist talent, Warlock class is not the same thing, but it does give you card selection on one of the modes, and once it's fully leveled up, it does a buttload of damage to everybody at the end of every turn, which is, you know, not necessarily better than a fully leveled artist talent, but it's up there in comparison. It's kind of like it. There's also Pyromancer's Goggles, by the way, last card I'll mention. I am playing this card in my build of the deck, which I'll remind you is in the description down there if you do want a concrete deck list for this thing. I tried to keep the budget below $250 on Card Kingdom, $125 on TCG players. So I did kind of build with a budget in mind, but I didn't keep it at like a $40 budget or whatever. Like, we did allow ourselves to spend a little bit of money building this deck, but I guess the good news about Pyromancer's Goggles is that it's only $1, and it's yet another thing that will not only ramp you. You do want mana in this deck. I said I wasn't going to talk about rocks, but you do play them. The deck wants to make a lot of mana. So Goggles not only does that, but it's another thing that copies spells, which you definitely want in the deck. So I think it's worth paying the $5 for Goggles, especially considering some of the time it's going to come down and immediately cast a second spell. But anyway, y'all, that's it. And I think we actually made like pretty good time on this. I was really frightened when I started this series that all these videos are going to be an hour long, but I think we did okay. So let me know what I didn't bring up in this video. Again, like notwithstanding removal and rocks, there are plenty of other cards that I could have mentioned for this video, and I ended up cutting like 20 things off this list. So if you got anything that you're playing in BW3 right now, I want to know about it. And again, check out the deck list in the description. I don't get any money. I don't have like an affiliate link or anything, so I don't get paid when you look at the list or buy the list or anything. I just want you to know there's a list down there. The only way I really get paid is from Patreon. So if you want to throw $1 in the Patreon bucket and kind of reward the hard work around here, especially lately, I feel like I've been working around the clock, then give me $1 of your hard-earned money every month, and I will let you vote on what videos we even do around here, except for the birthday videos. Although you guys on Patreon technically did vote for this one like 2 months ago when I was like, hey, if I did a Final Fantasy Commander deck, which one would you guys want to see? And you picked Black Waltz number 3, so that's what I'm doing for my... Even on my... I get to do whatever video I want to, I still consider the Patreon people. So if you want to be one of those people, I consider $1 a month is all it takes. I'm pitching it hard. It's because I need it. But anyway, that's all I've got for this one. Just use the like button if you don't have $1. That'll put it in more people's recommended feeds, and they'll be like, ooh, Black Waltz, I want to play with that guy. What's this? And they'll watch it, and then I'll, get all the views, and then I'll get all the power and the money, and then the women. I watch these back with my wife sometimes. She's going to love that. But either way, that's all I've got for this one. So just hit me up in the comment section, and I will catch you cats later. I'm Deb from The Place. Thanks for watching, Wizards. Spread love and be kind.